Welcome to the Funeral Channel Network podcast. If you are a regular listener of a Funeral Channel Network podcast, you know how vital and honestly how profound conversations about end-of-life care and grieving can really be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So today, we are bringing that exact spirit into our deep dive. And I want to start by asking you to just imagine something for a second. Imagine a massive, just incredibly violent thunderstorm is rolling in.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right, so the sky turns this bruised purple color, the wind is howling, and the thunder is literally physically shaking the floorboards of your house. Now, your first completely visceral instinct as a parent.
Oh, to hide them. Grab the kids.
Exactly. Grab your kid, pull them into a windowless basement, lock the door, because you want to keep them safe from the lightning, right? Safe from the chaos of the storm.
Right, it's just basic protection.
But what if locking them in the dark actually makes the storm infinitely more terrifying?
Oh, yeah, because they don't know what's happening.
Exactly. Because they can't see the rain or, understand what the thunder actually is, their imagination just goes totally wild. They picture monsters, they picture the world literally ending. And today, we are talking about the ultimate emotional thunderstorm, which is death.
The biggest one of all.
Yeah. And we're going to explore why our deepest parental instinct to lock our kids away from funerals might actually be the most damaging thing we can possibly do.
I love that basement analogy because it captures the exact psychological trap that so many families fall into. I mean, we constantly confuse shielding a child's eyes with protecting their mind.
Yes.
But a shielded mind, especially a young one, just starts inventing its own horrors in the dark.
It really does. So for our listeners, our mission today is to build a highly practical psychological toolkit for you, because this is one of the most common, agonizing dilemmas a family can face. Should children attend funerals?
It's such a heavy question.
It is. And whether you are a parent sitting in a hospital waiting room right now, maybe an aunt trying to support your sister, or just someone fascinated by family grief dynamics, we want to equip you to guide children through life's hardest moments without, causing further trauma.
And to do that, we are grounding this entire discussion in some really fascinating source material. We've got a highly focused essay titled Children and Funerals, To Go or Not to Go.
Right.
And we are also leaving in some incredibly practical insights and tangible resources developed by the Funeral Program site, as well as Celebrate Prints.
Which are fantastic resources, by the way.
Truly. And the core philosophy running through all these sources is, well, it's a massive paradigm shift. It completely upends the traditional wisdom of just keeping kids away from grief.
Because the old wisdom was just like, they're too young to understand, keep them home.
Exactly. But the text reveals that thoughtful, highly structured inclusion is actually a powerful engine for healing.
I really want to pull apart that tension, though. That tension between the protective instinct and the power of inclusion. Because the essay starts by tackling that foundational to go or not to go dilemma.
Right.
And it points out that the decision depends on a bunch of factors, like the child's age, their specific temperament, and obviously their relationship to the person who died.
Sure.
But there is a very hard boundary drawn right at the beginning of the text, which is that children should never, under any circumstances, be forced to attend.
No, never. Forcing attendance turns what should be a ritual of mourning into an actual site of trauma.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the essay makes a really crucial pivot immediately after setting that boundary. It argues that completely excluding them, so making that unilateral adult decision to leave them at home without giving them a voice at all.
Right, just making the choice for them.
Exactly. Doing that creates a profound psychological void for the kid. And that void is where severe confusion, feelings of abandonment, and deep-seated fears take root.
So going back to our thunderstorm analogy, when you lock them in the basement, they just hear the booming noises above them. They know something massive and terrible is happening upstairs because, let's be real, they can feel the tension in the adults.
Oh, 100%. Kids are total emotional sponges.
Right. They know when their parents are completely devastated, and if you don't show them the storm, their imagination makes it 100 times worse than the reality of just seeing the rain.
A child's imagination is incredibly potent, especially when it's fueled by ambient adult anxiety.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Ambient adult anxiety.
The text explicitly warns against this fear and confusion. It breathes in the silence of exclusion. When a child sees their mother crying uncontrollably, right? But then they're told, oh, everything is fine, just stay in your room.
They don't buy it.
They absolutely do not believe everything is fine. What they believe is that the world is fundamentally unsafe and, even worse, The adults are lying to them about it.
Wow. So the goal is to bring them upstairs, hold their hand, and watch the storm together from a safe distance. But practically speaking, how do we actually do that? Because the text suggests the entire process rests on two foundational pillars: preparation and choice.
And those two things are completely intertwined.
You can't have one without the other.
Right. You cannot offer a child a genuine choice if they have literally no idea what they are choosing between. And on the flip side, preparation is totally useless if it's just a prelude to forcing them into a pew anyway.
They are inseparable, and preparation seems to be where the real heavy lifting happens. Like, it is a very deliberate, highly structured process of demystifying death.
It is. Which brings us to the actual vocabulary of loss.
Okay, reading this section of the source material was honestly a bit of a shock to the system for me.
I can imagine.
Because it asks us to completely abandon the way our culture has trained us to talk about dying for decades.
Right.
The text explicitly states that explaining death requires age-appropriate, simple, and incredibly direct language. For younger kids, it demands literal phrases like, their body stopped working, or simply, they have died.
It feels incredibly stark to an adult ear because we are so conditioned to soften the blow.
That's exactly it. The instinct is always to use a euphemism. Grandma went to sleep, or we lost Uncle John. It just feels so much kinder.
Sure.
Looking at a 4-year-old and saying, the body stopped working, feels almost aggressive. Like you are stripping away all the warmth and the spiritual comfort of the moment.
It does feel aggressive to us.
Yeah.
But we have to look at this through the lens of cognitive development.
Okay.
The text aggressively refutes the idea that euphemisms are kind. It explains that they actually create deep, terrifying misunderstandings because young children possess highly literal minds.
Right. They don't get metaphors.
They do not understand abstract metaphors at all. If you tell a 4-year-old that grandma went to sleep and now she is gone forever, you have literally just weaponized their own biology against them.
Oh my God, because they have to go to sleep every single night.
Exactly. So if a child's literal mind hears went to sleep, they aren't mapping that to a peaceful, painless passing at the end of a long life. They're mapping it to their own bed at 8 p.m.
They must be terrified to close their eyes.
They are. They're lying there thinking, if I go to sleep, will I disappear like grandma? If mommy takes a nap on the couch, is she ever going to wake up?
That is the exact neurological trap the text warns about. You are trying to shield them from the finality of death, but what you actually do is end up giving them chronic bedtime anxiety.
That's exactly what happens. And consider the other really common phrase you mentioned, we lost him.
Right.
To a child, losing something means it can be found. You lose your car keys, you look for them, you lose a toy, you check under the couch.
So true.
If we lost Uncle John, the kid is thinking, why is everyone just sitting around crying? Why aren't we forming a search party right now?
Which just stretches the grieving process out infinitely. The child is basically trapped in this perpetual waiting room, waiting for the person to be found.
Precisely. And that's why the essay is so adamant about this. Simple, direct, biological language establishes a firm foundation of undeniable truth.
The body stopped working.
Right. Saying the body stopped working gives the child a concrete, definitive reason for the absence. It actually respects their intelligence.
It really does.
Because a body stopping working doesn't leave room for the terrifying ambiguity of sleep or getting lost. Now, the text does acknowledge that older children, preteens and teenagers, they are ready for more nuanced conversations about beliefs, maybe an afterlife or complex emotional states.
Sure, they can handle the abstracts.
But that bedrock layer must always be the honest biological reality, first and foremost.
Okay, so once that baseline of truth is established, once they actually understand the what of the situation, the text moves into preparing them for the where.
The environment.
Right, and this pregame preparation for the funeral environment is absolutely fascinating. We are talking about demystifying a highly charged, incredibly sensory-heavy space before they ever even step foot in the parking lot.
It's so necessary.
The sources emphasize describing the casket, the sheer volume of flowers in the room, and maybe most importantly, the people crying.
Because this is really all about managing sensory and emotional overload. I mean, a funeral home is a very bizarre environment for a child.
It makes me think of preparing a kid for their very first trip to a major sports stadium.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Because if you just take a child from their quiet living room and drop them into an 80,000-seat arena without any warning whatsoever, they are going to completely melt down.
Oh, yeah. The noise alone.
The screaming crowds, the massive concrete structures, the loud buzzers, the strange smells of the food. It's just pure sensory overload. You have to prep them days in
You have
advance.
to build a roadmap.
Exactly. You tell them, we are going to a massive building. It's going to be incredibly loud. People are going to be yelling and painting their faces, but it's okay. They're just excited about the game. You give them a map of what to expect so their nervous system isn't just completely hijacked by surprise.
And a funeral requires that exact same mapping, because walking into a room full of adults who are behaving in completely unprecedented ways is deeply jarring for a kid.
Yeah, children rarely see the adults in their lives lose control like that.
Right. Adults spend most of their parenting lives hiding their emotional breakdowns from their kids.
We really do. We cry in the shower, or we wait until we're alone in the car so the kids don't see us lose it.
Exactly. So when a child suddenly sees their usually strong, stoic uncle openly sobbing in a room full of people, their brain registers that as a massive threat.
Because the protector is vulnerable.
Yes. The child thinks, the adults are broken, therefore I am unsafe.
Hmm.
So the text focuses heavily on mitigating this specific reaction. It advises telling children well in advance that there is no right or wrong way to feel today,
Wow.
and that people will express their sadness differently.
So you are essentially giving the child permission to witness adult vulnerability.
That is a beautiful way to frame it. By prepping them, you remove the shock value completely. If the parent says beforehand, Uncle John loved Grandma very much, and today he might cry a lot because he misses her, the child enters that room armed with context.
Context is everything.
It really is. So when Uncle John cries, the child doesn't panic. The child thinks, oh, Mom told me this would happen. This is what sadness looks like. It normalizes grief as a healthy, expected response rather than a terrifying anomaly.
And the text points out that you have to prepare them for the whole spectrum of grief, right? Not just the crying.
Right, because grief looks different for everyone.
Exactly. Some people will be wailing. Some people will just be staring blankly at the wall, totally dissociated. And some people might even be laughing loudly while telling a funny story about the person who died.
Yes, the laughter often throws kids off the most.
If a kid isn't prepped for that, they're going to be incredibly confused by a group of adults laughing next to a casket. But if you make the environment predictable, the child feels secure enough to process their own feelings, rather than just surviving the sensory shock of the room.
Predictability creates safety. But there is one element of the environment that requires a very specific, incredibly delicate kind of preparation.
The casket.
Yes, that is the focal point of the whole room.
Preparing a child for an open casket feels like the most daunting task of all of this. But the text gives incredibly practical advice here.
Very actionable.
It says if there is an open casket, you have to explain exactly what the person will look like beforehand. You must tell the child the body will not move. You must tell them it will not respond or speak. You must even prepare them for the fact that the person might look different.
Which is so important.
Yeah, maybe because of makeup, the funeral home used, or illness, or just the harsh biological reality of death. And then, above all else, the text states they must be given the choice to view or not view the body.
The phrasing in the source text is really vital here. It says, giving them the choice to view or not view the body helps them feel more in control.
Yeah.
And we really need to explore the psychology of autonomy in a grieving environment.
Because generally speaking, children have zero autonomy in their daily lives.
None.
They wear the shoes they're told to wear, they go to school when they're told, they eat the dinner that is put in front of them.
Right. And now add death to that equation. Death is the ultimate devastating loss of control for the entire family.
The ultimate helplessness.
Exactly. The adults are reeling because they couldn't stop the illness or they couldn't prevent the accident. The daily schedule is completely destroyed. The house is full of strangers bringing casseroles. For a child, their entire predictable, safe universe is suddenly chaotic.
So true.
So in the middle of that profound powerlessness, restoring a tiny fragment of agency, like the simple choice to walk up to the casket or to just stay by the back door, it acts as a psychological lifeline.
Because by letting them choose, you are sending a very clear message. You're saying, your boundaries matter. Even in this chaotic room full of overwhelmed adults, you have a say over your own body and your own comfort.
Yes. It prevents a difficult, sad experience from crossing the line into a traumatic one, because trauma often stems directly from the feeling of utter helplessness.
Choice is the antidote to helplessness.
Exactly. And the script the text provides is so grounded. The body won't move.
Mhm.
It manages expectations at a strictly biological level.
Which is brilliant because if you don't tell a literal-minded child that the body won't move, they might be terrified waiting for the person to suddenly sit up like a zombie.
Right.
Or if the person looks pale or has heavy makeup on, the child might be horrified by the visual mismatch from how they remember them. So that concrete preparation is actually an act of deep kindness.
It really is. But here's the thing, even with perfect preparation, even with the right vocabulary and a really clear understanding of the room, the sheer emotional weight of a funeral can eventually crush a child's coping mechanisms. The actual day arrives, and the energy in the room is just too heavy for them to carry for that long.
Which introduces what might be the most brilliant logistical strategy in this entire source text.
The trusted adult protocol.
Yes, the trusted adult protocol. It is an absolute masterclass in managing realistic family dynamics during a crisis. The text strongly advises that during the service, a trusted adult, like a close family friend, maybe an aunt or an uncle, should be explicitly assigned to the child.
Assigned to be their shadow.
Right. This person becomes the child's safe harbor. But let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because I imagine a lot of parents listening might be bristling at this idea.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Because parents manage their kids' meltdowns all the time. At the grocery store, at the doctor's office, on long airplane rides. Why farm this out? Why can't the parents just handle their own kid at the funeral? It feels almost like, I don't know, abandoning your child when they need you most.
Does it feel counterintuitive?
Yeah.
But we have to look really honestly at the neurological and emotional state of a grieving parent in that exact moment.
Okay.
A parent who is burying their own mother or their spouse or their sibling, they are in a state of massive cognitive and emotional overload.
Just totally depleted.
Completely. Their nervous system is likely in fight or flight mode. They haven't slept. They are exhausted. And they are there to do the incredibly heavy, devastating work of saying a final goodbye.
They literally do not have the bandwidth to co-regulate a child.
They don't.
Because if a parent is drowning in their own grief, they cannot be the life raft for a 6-year-old.
Exactly. And a child's nervous system relies on the parent's nervous system to feel safe. It's a biological tether. If the parent is totally dysregulated, the child instantly becomes dysregulated.
Wow.
The parent cannot simultaneously fully surrender to their own grief and hypermonitor a child's minute-to-minute emotional temperature. If they try to do both, they will fail at both.
The grief gets suppressed, and the kid still isn't getting what they need.
Right, which is harmful for everyone.
Right.
So the parent's grief gets suppressed, which causes long-term issues, and the child feels that tension anyway.
So this trusted adult acts as a pressure valve.
A pressure valve for the entire family unit. The trusted adult's sole priority is the child. So if the child has a sudden stream of questions, you know how kids are. Why is that box so shiny? Why is that sad music playing? When can we eat?
Right. They just fire off questions at the worst times.
Exactly. The trusted adult can lean down and whisper the answers without interrupting the parent's mourning process. And if the child gets antsy or overwhelmed or honestly just bored, the trusted adult can seamlessly scoop them up and take them out to the lobby or maybe for a walk in the garden.
So the child's sense of security is fiercely protected.
Yes.
Mm.
And the parents are given the profound gift of being able to grieve without guilt.
It's just about recognizing human limitations. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and a grieving parent's cup is completely bone-dry empty.
So true.
And having that safety net in place really allows the deep dive into the text's next major theme, which is moving children from being passive observers sitting in the back row to becoming active participants in the ritual itself.
This is such a beautiful transition in the text. It's the move from just mitigating harm to actively promoting long-term healing.
Right.
The text outlines that involving children in the service can be incredibly meaningful for them, and it lists specific, very physical actions, like drawing a picture, writing a short note, placing a meaningful item into the casket, or even doing a brief reading if they're a little older.
We really need to unpack the anthropology and psychology of physical rituals here. Because why is the physical act of, say, a 5-year-old placing a crayon drawing of a dinosaur into a casket so deeply impactful for their brain?
It comes down to bridging the gap between profound emotional weight and their limited verbal capacity.
Tell me more about that.
Well, think about an adult. An adult can stand at a podium, look out at a crowd of 100 people, and deliver a beautiful, complex 20-minute eulogy about legacy and love and the shape of the whole left behind.
Right.
A young child obviously cannot do that. They just don't have the abstract vocabulary to articulate the crushing weight of their loss.
but they feel it just as deeply as the adult does.
Oh, they feel it immensely.
Oh.
But because they can't speak it, that grief gets trapped in their bodies. It becomes physical anxiety.
Wow.
So physical actions become the language of childhood grief. Placing that drawing of a dinosaur next to their grandfather's hand translates all their complex, tangled emotions into a concrete act of farewell. It externalizes the love.
So to that child, placing the dinosaur in the casket carries the exact same emotional weight as the adult's 20-minute eulogy.
Exactly. It is their unique contribution.
And contribution is key here, isn't it?
It really is. When they participate, they are no longer just a helpless spectator to an adult tragedy. They become an active member of the community that is honoring the person who died.
It solidifies their sense of belonging.
Yes, and it validates their relationship with the deceased. It says, your love for Grandpa matters just as much as everyone else's.
I am genuinely relieved to see the cultural shift that the essay highlights here, because it notes that organizations like the Funeral Program Site are really recognizing this need for personalization.
It's a huge shift.
Historically, funerals were these incredibly rigid, austere affairs.
Yeah.
Very Victorian, right?
Yeah.
Everyone wore black, stood in absolute silence, and kids were just expected to be seen and not heard.
Or lifted home entirely.
Right. So the fact that modern services are integrating these child-led, highly personal moments naturally into the ceremony is just such a healthy evolution.
We are definitely witnessing a massive upgrade in our collective emotional intelligence regarding death. I mean, we're finally understanding that a memorial service isn't just an archaic protocol that we have to get through.
Right.
It is a vital psychological tool designed specifically for the living. And the living includes the children.
But let's be pragmatic for a second here.
Always.
We can talk about profound rituals and placing beautiful drawings in caskets, but a child's attention span is still biologically limited.
Oh, severely limited.
A kid can be profound and present for about 5 minutes. After that, the gravity of the room vanishes for them, and they were going to start swinging their legs, kicking the queue in front of them, or very loudly asking when they can eat a cookie.
Which is completely developmentally appropriate. I mean, expecting a child to maintain absolute solemnity for a 60-minute service is a setup for total failure.
This reality brings us to a really fascinating, super practical section of the source material. How do we manage the downtime of a service?
Yes.
Because there is a lot of downtime. The text highlights tangible tools, specifically children's memorial activity sheets or coloring pages, and it explicitly points to companies like the Funeral Program Site and Celebrate Prints as really leading the way in providing these exact resources.
The text approaches this from a highly functional standpoint. These materials are designed to offer a gentle, focused distraction while simultaneously helping the child process the environment they're sitting in.
And the design is really intentional, right?
Very intentional. Designing these tools requires soft colors, friendly, non-threatening imagery, and clear, simple instructions.
The essay even recommends setting up a dedicated physical space at the service, like maybe a small, low table in the corner with crayons and quiet toys.
Yes.
But I really need to challenge this concept for a second, because I can hear traditionalists arguing against this right now in my head.
Oh, the pushback is real.
Does having a coloring station at a funeral risk trivializing the absolute gravity of the event? I mean, someone has died. This is a sacred moment of mourning. Doesn't bringing out crayons and activity sheets turn a somber memorial into a pediatrician's waiting room? Are we disrespecting the deceased by catering to the kids?
That is easily the most common pushback, and honestly, it is a completely valid question to ask. But the source text fiercely defends this practice, and the child psychology backs it up completely.
Okay, tell me how.
The essay explicitly clarifies that the goal is not to trivialize the experience. It is to provide a necessary, supportive outlet for a child's unique emotional rhythm.
Explain that rhythm to me. How does a coloring sheet honor the gravity of the room?
Think of a child's ability to process heavy grief, like holding their breath underwater.
Okay.
An adult can dive deep into the sorrow of a funeral, sit in that heavy, dark water for an hour, and process it continuously. An adult has massive emotional lung capacity.
Right.
A child cannot do that. Their emotional lungs are just too small. A child dips below the surface, feels the intense sadness, maybe cries for a minute, and almost immediately their emotional lungs are burning. They desperately need to come up for air.
And the coloring sheet is the air.
Exactly. The coloring sheet is the air. Playing quietly, coloring, or doing a word search on a memorial activity sheet that is them coming up to breathe, It regulates their nervous system.
Wow.
Once they have caught their breath and stabilized, they might dive back down into the sadness for a few more minutes when they hear a song they recognize. They cycle in and out of the grief. It is a biological imperative, not a sign of disrespect.
So the soft colors and the specific drawing prompts from places like Celebrate Prince, maybe a prompt asking them to draw their favorite memory of grandma that allows them to engage with the loss, but at a safe, manageable depth.
Exactly.
They get to toggle between the heavy reality of the room and the psychological safety of the paper.
And having that dedicated space, that little table the text suggests, is just a brilliant logistical move. It ensures the children remain part of the collective experience without disrupting the adults who need to stay underwater, so to speak.
Because the kids are still physically in the room.
Yes. They're absorbing the ambient love, the music, the stories being told. But they are absorbing it in a way tailored to their sensory needs. If you force a child to sit perfectly still in a hard pew for an hour, they aren't learning respect for the dead.
No, they're just miserable.
They're just experiencing physical anxiety and building a lifelong resentment toward the concept of funerals.
So you aren't turning the funeral into a waiting room. You are translating the ritual of the funeral into a language the child can actually fluently speak.
Exactly. It is a highly sophisticated approach to grief facilitation.
But what happens when, despite all this incredible knowledge, despite the honest vocabulary, the trusted adult, the activity sheets attendance, simply isn't an option?
It happened.
Because there are going to be situations where a family looks at the reality and says, we just cannot burn the kids. It's not going to work.
And the text makes ample room for that reality.
Mm.
It brings us to the critical importance of cultural nuance and valid alternatives to attendance. Because the essay emphasizes that we must deeply respect cultural and family traditions.
This is vital because grief is obviously not a monolith.
Not at all.
Different cultures process death in radically different ways. In some traditions, children are expected to be front and center, actively participating in the rites from the absolute moment they can walk. It's a fully immersive cultural expectation.
Right.
But in other traditions, children are strictly kept away from the burial site or the service entirely, viewed as a necessary protection of their spirit, or just out of deep cultural respect for the dead.
And the essay is crystal clear on this. There is no one-size-fits-all psychological mandate that should ever override a family's deep-rooted cultural framework.
That's a relief to hear.
Understanding and honoring those traditions ensures that decisions actually align with the family's core values.
So for a parent who chooses not to bring their child, whether that's due to strict cultural norms or just looking at their individual, maybe highly sensitive child, and knowing a crowded funeral home would be a total disaster, how do we reconcile that with the earlier warning?
The warning about exclusion.
Right, because we established earlier that excluding them causes fear and confusion. If they don't go to the funeral, how do we prevent the basement thunderstorm effect?
The text provides beautifully adaptable solutions here. It outlines alternative pathways for involvement that actually carry the exact same psychological weight as attending the service.
Like what?
It suggests visiting the gravesite a few days later, when it is completely quiet and the crowds are gone, or creating a physical memory box at home together, or even holding a small, highly private gathering in the living room, specifically designed just for the child to say goodbye.
If we look closely at what these alternatives achieve, the core objective isn't actually about the child being inside a specific building at 2 p.m. on a Saturday, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
The funeral home is just one vehicle for grief. The true objective is giving the child a structured, supported, truthful way to say goodbye.
Yeah.
A quiet graveside visit on a random Tuesday afternoon where the child lays a flower on the dirt and talks about their grandfather offers the exact same psychological benefits of inclusion and processing.
Because the mechanics are exactly the same.
Precisely.
They still get the honest vocabulary. They still get the preparation. They still execute a physical action to externalize their grief. They just do it in an environment that is calibrated to their specific capacity.
It adapts the core principles of grief processing to fit the boundaries of the family. The child is not left in the dark basement, but they also aren't forced into a situation that shatters them.
I really want to emphasize this for the listeners because it completely strips away parental guilt, and parents agonize over this.
Oh, they lose sleep over it.
If I bring them, I traumatize them. If I leave them home, I abandon them. It feels like a lose-lose. But the text offers immense grace here. It tells us there is no universal law, only what is healthiest for your specific child and your specific family context. You can achieve beautiful, healthy closure entirely outside the walls of the funeral home if that is what your family requires.
It provides multiple, valid, healthy pathways to the exact same destination, which is a child who feels seen, included, and emotionally supported in the wake of a loss.
But here is the catch.
There's always a catch.
Whether the child attended the massive main service with the coloring sheets, or they had a quiet, profound moment in the living room with a memory box, the text notes something that catches almost every parent off guard. The end of the ceremony is not the end of the process. The grief does not stay neatly contained in that one weekend.
This brings us to what might be the most crucial ongoing reality for families to understand: the long tail of grief.
The long tail.
The essay explicitly states that after the funeral is over, children's questions and reactions will continue to evolve over time. It states very clearly, grief does not follow a linear path.
Nonlinear grief. I think this is where adults get the most frustrated and confused.
Definitely.
Because a child might go to the funeral, do the coloring sheets from Celebrate Prince, place the flower in the casket, and seem totally 100% fine.
Like nothing happened.
Right. The next week, they are back at school, playing tag, laughing, and life is completely normal. And the parent breathes a huge sigh of relief and thinks, ew, we did it right. We got through it. Kids are just so resilient.
And then
6 months later, out of absolutely nowhere, while eating cereal on a Tuesday morning, the child just breaks down sobbing. Or they start asking these terrifying, intense questions about death.
And that completely panics the parents.
They freak out.
Their immediate reaction is, wait, what triggered this? Did someone say something to them at school? We already dealt with this loss. But the text explains exactly why this happens, and it is entirely natural. It notes that children will revisit their feelings at different stages of their development.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. What does revisiting grief at different developmental stages actually look like in a child's brain?
Okay, think of a child's cognitive development like walking up a staircase.
Okay, a staircase.
When a 4-year-old loses their grandmother, they process that massive loss using the tools available on the very first step of the staircase. At 4, their understanding of time is very limited.
Right.
They understand the body stopped working, and they feel the immediate pain of her absence today, but they don't understand the permanence of time.
Right. A 4-year-old thinks next week is a literal lifetime away.
Exactly. But then that child turns 7. They physically step up to a new cognitive stair. Their brain develops the capacity to understand the concept of forever.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, the reality of the loss hits them in a completely new way. They realize, wait, Grandma isn't just gone right now.
Yeah.
She is going to miss my birthday next year. She is going to miss me graduating.
So they literally have to re-grieve the exact same death, but with new, heavier cognitive tools.
Yes, the grief resurfaces, not because the parent did anything wrong, and not because the child is regressing. It resurfaces because the child's brain has unlocked a new, deeper level of understanding.
That makes so much sense.
And this will happen again. When they hit 12, they might begin to understand the biological fragility of life, and suddenly they are terrified about their own mortality, and they re-grieve the grandmother through that new lens.
It's a cyclical process.
The text warns us that because of this cycle, we must create space for ongoing conversation. Reassurance cannot be a one-time event at the funeral. It has to be an open door for years to come.
If we pull all of this together, if we connect the end of this journey back to the very beginning of our deep dive, it paints a really stunning picture.
It really does.
The initial instinct we discussed was to shield the child, lock them in the basement during the storm to protect them from the immediate sharp pain of the thunder.
Right.
But the text proves that by actively including them, using the preparation, the stark but honest vocabulary, the trusted adult protocol, the activity sheets, you aren't just helping them survive a single Tuesday afternoon memorial service.
No, the stakes are much, much higher than a single afternoon.
Yeah.
You are building their fundamental emotional architecture.
You are giving them a lifelong emotional immune system. You are teaching them at the most foundational age that grief is survivable.
Yes.
You are showing them that sadness will not break them, that asking scary questions is welcomed by the adults they love, and that memory is a beautiful tool, not a ghost to hide from.
The essay highlights this outcome beautifully in its conclusion. The emotional benefits of this kind of inclusion are massive. Children who are given this structured opportunity develop a much healthier, more realistic understanding of death.
Which serves them forever.
Exactly. They learn how to identify and sit with their own sadness. They learn rituals for remembering loved ones. You are essentially handing them the emotional roadmap they will use for every single future loss they will inevitably face in their adult lives.
It changes everything about how they will process the world. Okay, let's recap the core takeaways for you, the listener, because we have covered incredible psychological ground today.
You really have.
If you are facing this impossible decision, remember the foundational pillars of the text: preparation and choice.
Always.
Ditch the euphemisms completely. Use the biological truth. Their body stopped working. Implement the genius trusted adult strategy to act as a pressure valve, protecting both the child's nervous system and the grieving parent's right to mourn.
So important.
And please do not be afraid to utilize practical, tangible resources like the memorial activity sheets we discussed to give kids a safe, designated, age-appropriate way to come up for air and process their grief in real-time bursts.
It is a comprehensive, profoundly empathetic framework. It takes an event that has the potential to be deeply traumatic and transforms it into a profound moment of family connection and healing.
It really is a paradigm shift.
But before we wrap up today, this text and our entire discussion raise a fascinating question, and I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over.
Lay it on us.
The text we analyze today focuses entirely on how we as adults guide children through their first encounters with death today. It is entirely outward-looking.
Right.
But I want you to turn that lens inward for a moment. Think about your own life. Think about your own immediate, visceral discomfort with funerals. Think about your own struggle to talk about death right now, today.
Oh, wow.
How much of your adult anxiety stems directly from how you were treated during a loss when you were a child?
That is heavy.
Were you shielded? Were you locked in the basement during the thunderstorm, left to imagine the monsters? Were you given confusing, well-meaning euphemisms about someone going to sleep or getting lost that left you terrified in the dark?
I know I was.
Right. If we are fundamentally changing how we guide children today by using honesty, inclusion, and tangible tools to process their pain, are we actually slowly curing the generational fear of grief itself?
What an incredibly powerful thought to end on. If we change the beginning of the story for them, we change the entire culture of how we handle the end.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly important Funeral Channel Network deep dive. Facing these heavy, murky topics head-on, walking out of the basement, holding their hand and watching the storm together is truly the most profound way to care for the people we love. Until next time.